120 odd thousand left Iraq out of maybe 130,000, out of population maybe 140,000. At the end, there were only 6,000 left in Iraq, so really quite a mass exodus.
Sometimes things like the Fahud, sometimes it's, I've seen on organizations that work with Jews from Arab countries, it's sometimes referred to as the Jewish Nakba. Is that how you would describe it?
I describe it as a black stain on the people of Iraq, really, who did this. By the same token, I have to say that a lot of Iraqis stood by the Jews and prevented more massacre. Otherwise, there would have been loads and loads more killed. I can tell you there are loads of stories of how people stood at a Jewish home protecting it from the mob.
So what happened to the Iraqi Jews after they left Iraq? What happened to their cultural life? Where did they go?
Those who stayed or those who left?
Well, first I'd like to deal with those who left and then those who stayed.
Those who left, they left en masse to Israel.
What kind of numbers are we talking here?
120 odd thousand. And obviously Israel at the time was not quite prepared to accept that huge number. And they went through a process of de-Arabization because the power to be in Israel at the time was with the Ashkenazi, and they looked down at those Jews from Iraq that came in. Well, really, they did not realize. They thought they were all ignorant peasants. But in real terms, a lot of them were doctors, accountants, lawyers. They were well educated. They got a shock, really. They expected they're getting workers to work on the farm. They didn't realize nobody worked in the farm of these people. They didn't know how. So they were not treated right. And there was obviously a campaign to de-Arabize them.
What does de-Arabizing mean, though? What does it entail?
Take the Arab culture out of them.
How?
And mold them into, by whatever means, whether by coercion, whether by harassment, or persuasion, or something, or make them feel inferior, that the only way to get a job, the only way to get in the army is remove your Arabic feelings, Arabic culture out. The language, for example, they really had to speak Hebrew. But you can say this was also part of the Zionist ideology, or negation of the diaspora. So the people would all come and speak Hebrew and nothing else. But also Hebrew, by the way, with Ashkenazi tongue, with Ashkenazi pronunciation.
And by Ashkenazi,
People like you, for example, who went to work in a broadcasting company, if they were Iraqis or something with their accent, that was not acceptable.
Because obviously, semantic, in terms of language structure and so on, Hebrew is actually meant to be close to Arabic. So when you say Ashkenazi, you mean
Accent.
Accent. You mean they changed pronunciations to fit
Yeah.
more European or Eastern European.
Yeah. Yes.
And, yeah. So and what did
The guttering sounds, shouldn't not acceptable.
But what was the response from Mizrahi and Sephardim, in your case Iraqi Jews, to that? Did they fight back, or did they conform? What did they?
I think, life was tough. I don't want to say, life was very tough for them and there. And I don't blame them for the fact that they had to conform. A lot of them had. There were very few, really, who were writers, academics, etc., who decided to rebel. And, those who were on the left, really, even the leftists, even the communists, they had to conform at the end. There were few who was a movement, Black Panther movement, but that's very limited and had very short period because it was a mountain to climb. And when you're hungry, when you're starving, when you're trying to find work, these ideas, political ideas, come second. What is important is that you make a living and feed yourself and your children. And for that reason, really, they had to conform.
So when you going a little bit back, just because I didn't ask this, when we look at, for example, Jewish life in Iraq itself, where were they mostly found? Were they mostly
in cities?
What kind of cities, though? Which cities?
The three biggest cities, was Baghdad. And in the early 20, there was 35% of Baghdad was Jewish. When you come to the 40s, 25%. Basra is another town with a huge Jewish population. And again, Mosul was a town with Jewish population. There were many other towns, but they would have a couple of thousand, 1,500. They don't have the masses that were in Baghdad. Baghdad really was a huge number. The great majority were in Baghdad.
So how does this compare? We were talking earlier about Israel. So how does, for example, your experience of being in England and choosing to settle here, well, partially by force, but how does that compare to those who went to Israel in terms of your identity and so on?
If I had gone to Israel.
No, I mean, how does it compare being here, being in England, versus being in Israel? In terms of, because you were talking about in Israel, they were part of the society was to de-Arabize in the early years. But I'm saying, how does that compare to your experience of being in England?
I wouldn't say I was de-Arabized, but obviously integrated with the society here. And because there were few of us, like at the time, a lot more now, there were few of us at the time. And, when you go study or work, etc., you're mixing up with a lot more British people. And you end up adopting British culture through no choice. Really, you're just part of it. You become part of it.
Because you were describing in your biography that I read that you went through a period where you sort of, not maybe forgot, but you put Arabness or Iraqiness, your Iraqi culture to the back burner, but then you started saying you had sort of yearning to return back to some of it.
My work, I was working as an engineer, and my work takes me to all sorts of places, right? Not with Iraqis, not with this, mainly British, and working late hours. So that doesn't, the question of being with people of my society is very limited. But when I retired, or just before I came to retirement, I got a yearning for my roots. So I started reading about Jews and the history of the Jews in Iraq, the history of Iraq, and became quite fascinated by that. And got to know more about the music. And I took it upon myself to try and bring people together. Iraqis, and Jews together. Because dialogue is very important. There cannot be peace without dialogue. So I organized things like concerts. I mean, that is a perfect medium, because through art, through music, you forget who you are. You forget whether you are Jewish or Muslim, and you forget which sect you are. You know, that doesn't matter. So people of all denominations, they get together and listen to the music. Now here, the music is, I won't say Jewish music, but it's by Jewish composers. We're talking about traditional Iraqi music. So these are by Jewish composers. Even the Jews didn't know this fellow was Jewish. Imagine, that shows the integration. The Muslims didn't know this fellow was Jewish. They thought he was a Muslim. But it doesn't matter, they love the music. You find the same thing, for example, even in Israel, in all the Arab world. Jews, Christians, doesn't matter who you are. People adore Kulthum, for example. Nobody thinks this is Muslim music or this is from Arab music. No. Everybody adores that kind of music. So the effect of music is really, has got no bounds, no religious bounds. So that, I took that up. So I started doing concerts and then started doing musical parties and restaurants and things like that. And did quite a few of those. And I'm not doing that much more now. But I found that helped bring people together. Initially, there was a fear amongst the Jews here, possibly because of radical Islam, possibly because of Arab extremism in places, you know. So they were worried about mixing with them. And equally, from the Arab side, they didn't feel, you know, they felt that the Jews were alien, if you like. And when they find all this yearning that Iraqi Jews have for Iraq, you know, they started admiring them. And in the process, there was a great deal of empathy of both sides, you know. And now maybe, I hope, some of the Iraqi Jews don't feel so, this feeling of enmity against the other Iraqis. And same thing with the Iraqis against the Jews, you know. So we got to carry that dialogue. And I attend a lot of lectures, a lot of Iraqi societies. And my objective is they get to know me and I get to know them. And we carry that dialogue.
So, because you're talking about this, so what is your, when you were organising this, was the hope of only creating dialogue, or was it also about remembering your old culture? Because one of the things that
through remembering the culture, you're bringing people together, and they start talking.
Is that now your?
And if they're talking, that's good.
Because technically you're probably one of the last part of the generation that remembers what Iraq was like, and you come from that culture. Has doing something like this meant that, although the culture you were born into won't ever really come back, but forms of that culture will be passed on to younger generations?
Oh, that's difficult.
Is that your?
That's difficult. I think to go passing to next generation is very difficult. My kids don't know Arabic. They don't feel part of that culture. So, it's going to be extinct, if you like, part of Jewish culture. It's not going to be. Funnily enough, in Israel, it's different. In Israel, there is, after all that period that I was speaking about of if you like, colonial oppression, I would call it, by Ashkenazis. No, they're rebelling. They're all coming out. They want to learn Arabic. They want to adopt the Arab culture. They love it. When you have music, everybody attends that. It's huge following. We can't compare to them at all. With that rebellion, all of a sudden now, in the last
Do you think that
few years,
Do you think that rebellion will have political consequences in Israel? Do you think, because possibly if you have people who are sort of rebelling and going almost to this Arab culture and identity, do you think that will have an impact on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? And if so, what kind?
I doubt it, because they've been brainwashed too much for so many years. I doubt whether, they could have been. They could have been the bridge between the Arabs and the Zionists and the Israelis, if you like, or the rest of the Israel. They could have been the bridge for peace. But I can't see that now. I see great difficulties. They generally tend to move towards the right, extreme right. And if you look at, they realized now that they can be a power, political power. But they went on the religious side, like this party, Shaz, which is a religious party of Mizrahim, Muslim Moroccans, who are, they got 12 seats in the parliament. That's quite substantial. And the government cannot do very much because there are so many parties in Israel. The government can't do very much without a coalition. And so they come to dictate what they want.
So that's very interesting. So what you're saying is also that in terms of the intergenerational links, you think it's already been lost in this country. But
Yeah.
at the same time, there are those who are arguing we're seeing a revival of Sephardim and Mizrahi culture.
In Israel.
But not here.
Not here, no.
So
Here, to some extent, obviously, because there is a connection between the two. A lot of people here go to Israel. A lot of them as well are Israelis who left Israel to come here for whatever reason, whether financial or otherwise, A lot of them are here. So there is that connection. And they go there, some of them many times a year. They even got houses there. So in that respect, they're bound to pick up whatever that is happening there.